Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Hewitt, and welcome to the Conservative Voice Show, your place for honest, controversial, and the hottest in political conversations. Hey, so what's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Conservative Voice Show. So, first, I'm just going to start off with that my life has been incredibly hectic lately, and I am terribly, terribly, terribly sorry for my lack of the show, lack of producing the show, and Instagram following me on any of my social media. I just haven't been there. And for that, I am greatly, greatly sorry. But I promise you guys, listen, I promise, I'm going to make it up to you today, all right? So today, I have back the New Era of Republicans founder, Chase, right? That guy, I think I interviewed him like 3 or 4 weeks ago on the show, talking about things leading up to, obviously, the election and everything going on in the political world. Well, we're going to do that same thing again today. And it is a doozy. I'm going to tell you, we're both Republicans. He's kind of from that new Trump era Republicans, and I hold kind of those like older school Republican beliefs. And we're going to talk about everything from Inauguration Day to the storming of the Capitol to Biden's first 100 days and everything in between. And make sure you stay at the end because I'll tell you and he'll tell you where Republicans need to go and how all of you young Republicans will play a part in that. And so make sure you follow along. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comments below. But before we get there, as you can see, I'm wearing this brand new swag t-shirt called RAZE Energy. Let me tell you about it. All right, this right here, this is called Galaxy Burst, and it's pretty good. Let me tell you, it's not as good as my favorite right here, which is Apollo, but this is a new energy drink called RAZE, made by Rep Sports. If you know them, they're probably one of the leading industries in like supplements and workout supplements and things like that for you to take, right? Well, let me tell you, I work in a career where I probably drink about 10 times more caffeine than I need to, and I drink probably at least one of these a day that I don't need to. But let me tell you, if it's a pre-workout or you just need your morning like coffee, caffeine, look no further than RAZE Energy. I'm gonna tell you, it has 0 calories, 0 carbs, 0 sugars, and even more, it has 0 of the crash, all right? So swing on over to Rep Sports. I'll leave a link down below. Use the code TCVS1776 at checkout. Save yourself 15% on all Rep Sports products. Buy yourself some protein powder and some pre-workout. Buy yourself a 12-pack of RAZE Energy and some protein powder. Whatever it may be, use TCVS at checkout. Get the body that you want. Get the energy that you want and save 15% doing it. Again, the link will be in the show notes. If you're watching on YouTube, it'll be in the description down below. Use TCVS1776 to check out 15%. Guys and everybody, without ado, let's go find Chase. So, hey Chase, welcome back.
What's going on, man? How you been?
I'm just going through, just trying to navigate the waters of our current political world that we're currently living in. So I know that you were on like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, something like that. And we had a conversation about just everything leading up to the election. And then obviously right before the Congress certified the electoral votes. And we haven't really spoken much since then. So as you know, and I'm sure all of the audience knows, the Capitol was stormed and was just taken by force by a group of individuals. I just want to see, what do you think about that? And how do you think that that's going to affect us going forward?
Well, first off, I just want to say one thing about that, because I think this is kind of it's obviously a very contested issue, and a lot of people have different opinions on it. But I have seen a lot of talk that Antifa was responsible. I've seen a lot of people on the right saying that. Now, if I'm just going to be totally honest, from the videos that I saw, and once again, I'm not claiming to have seen every video. I clearly don't know everything, but I did watch a lot of videos. From everything that I gathered, did not look like a large group of Antifa was there, from what I was able to tell.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Yeah, so I do think there does need to be some clarity on that, just because if we keep on making excuses for it like that, and blaming other people for it, I don't think that helps. But another thing is,
Go ahead.
there's no need to really like defend it or try and justify what happened by saying that it was Antifa, because I wasn't there. I'm sure many of the people listening, they weren't there. They're not the ones who did that. So, that's on them who did it. The people who stormed the Capitol. That's not on us. I'm not going to defend them. Now, I will admit, at the time when the building was being stormed, I did think it was, I don't want to say good, but I was more so shocked. I mean, I almost couldn't fathom what was happening, because I feel like for so long, the past 4 years, conservatives, they just sit back for the most part. There's not a lot of fight. There's very little protest. Nothing ever gets violent. Nothing ever gets kind of crazy like that. So it was really just shocking to see. But I mean, after something like that happens, it was very short-sighted, I think, to call it good or to think anything good was going to come out of it, like I did.
Well,
because
I think one problem that I have with a lot is that, and before Parler was taken down, I was on Parler, and then I'm on Clapper, which I guess you could say is like conservative TikTok, I guess you could say. And what's truly disgusting to me is that the amount of people that honestly support that on the right. There's a lot of people that are on the far right that are still supporting the overtaking and sieging of the U.S. Capitol. I said in my podcast right after it happened that the U.S. Capitol has not been sieged since 1814, when England stormed and burned the Capitol to the ground. That was the last time that the Capitol had been sieged.
Well, hold on just a second there, because I think that's another thing I've seen circulating, and that's not necessarily wrong. I mean, if you're going to call it, that it was sieged and it was taken over. But in the 60s, the group Black Panthers, they stormed the Capitol and they occupied it with rifles and loaded guns, and nothing happened. So I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to justify anything that happened. All I'm saying is I just don't want to do, I think it just needs to be careful, when it comes to saying that it was the first and only time that it's happened since 1812, only because that was obviously foreign enemy, the British, that burned, that seized the Capitol, burned down the White House. These were domestic, these were citizens.
I will say
these were our countrymen.
Weren't in the capital of the United States. They did not storm the seat of democracy. They stormed the Capitol building in California in 1967. They did not siege the seat of democracy. The building that around the world is a symbol of the free nation.
Well, I mean, yes.
So there was a siege
symbolically.
Yes. But
well, listen, symbolically, you could say yes. It is the symbol of democracy, if that's what you want to call it. But
that is
inside of it, I think it could be, you could characterize it as the farthest thing from the symbol of democracy, if you want to talk about what actually happens inside the building. Now, what does the building stand for? Yes, it stands for freedom. It stands for all the people in Congress that supposed to represent the people. But that's something that I don't think we've seen for a very long time. This is not like a new thing where our politicians, they don't represent us. And this is not like a right thing or a left thing. This is just politicians in general, on the left and the right. They do not represent their constituents. So when you see something like that,
I've said time and time again,
right,
that the House of Representatives have forgotten that they are representatives. They represent the people, whether not their special intentions, not the Democrat Party, not the Republican Party, not independent, not the Tea Party. Insert said political ideology that you want. Their job is to represent their constituents, not the people. So I can agree with that. I guess my biggest issue is as Republicans, if we're going to condemn like BLM riots, Antifa riots, KKK.
Well, yeah, 100%.
Whatever riots we were condemning pre-January 6th, we cannot condone the riots on January 6th just because it's a cause that we agree with. If we're going to condemn
No, I can totally agree with that. Which is why I mentioned I was terribly short-sighted of me to be, and it's what I really don't know the correct word for it, because I wouldn't say I was glad that it happened. Because obviously, if some of it was somewhat scary to see just how angry some of the people were. But I think, just to go back to my point previously, we kind of have to ask the question, because the politicians, they don't represent us. Okay. So, obviously the people who stormed the Capitol, they shouldn't have done it. All right. I think we can all agree they shouldn't have done it. But I think it's very just simplistic to lay all of the blame at the feet of the people who did it, and to kind of overlook the politicians who kind of fomented this, and the news media that fomented this for the last 4 years. I mean,
If
when
I
you
can
constantly
right there, because this is I just want to ask you this, okay, while you're on that topic. So, in Congress, July 4th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was written. Okay.
Mhm.
And I'm going to preface this with that I do not agree with what I'm about to say, but I'm going to propose a question that is going to be very, very heavy handed. So, inside the Declaration, it says that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, so being destructive to the certain unalienable rights among life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, right? It is the right of the people to alter
to
or
overthrow
abolish
that
it,
government.
and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles, and organizing and power in such a form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light of transient causes, blah, 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 right? So my question
Right.
is, are we at a point where our government is destructive to the ends of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and the defense of our unalienable rights?
Well, I don't even think that should really be a question. I think it's been far too long that our politicians have not represented us. This goes back to my whole point, is this has been building and building and building and building. And, we can continuously keep on blaming the people who do stuff like this, or we can, and I'm not saying we should not blame them, because, they're responsible for their own actions at the end of the day. Okay. That is the simple fact. They're responsible for their own actions. But to lay all of the blame at the feet of the people who stormed the Capitol, and to absolve some of the blame from the politicians who, seriously, I mean, they don't represent us.
You can kind of look at it as let's put just take a pressure cooker, right? And now let's put Republicans in there, conservatives, just any person right of the aisle, right? Or hell, I'd even say moderately on the left side of the aisle, can throw them in there too. And then the Russia collusion, the last 4 years, the silence in the media, just insert everything that has happened to conservatives in the Republican Party in the last 4 years. Put that in the pressure cooker, slap the lid on that, and now
that's exactly what I'm saying.
You have politicians, you have Trump, because Trump is not totally absolved either. Is his fault that the riots happened? No, but he definitely was cranking that temperature up. So, here's
the thing as well. If you,
and then you turn,
I think it's very, very easy to say that in hindsight, because we know what happened. Now, if you want to look at any politician and a speech that they've given where they give a fiery speech, they would be blamed if right after that crowd then got violent and destructive.
Well, I agree.
And so then what I'm saying though is, should we then lay the blame at the feet of the politicians who make a fiery speech?
I'm not saying that.
This happens all the time.
I'm not saying that he is responsible for it, but a fiery speech is meant to do what?
It's meant to fire up your base.
Exactly. So I'm not saying that he's responsible for it. That's not what I said at all. But you put him, corrupt politicians, and all of those people that have now cranked that flame up underneath that pressure cooker, and there's no place for that steam to go. Eventually the lid's going to blow. And that's what I think we saw on January 6th. It's just a outward exodus of the conservatives' frustration and ambition to actually have the government that we want, not the government that we're receiving. Now, do I think that was the right way to do it? No. I've said condemn it on the 6th. I'll condemn it now, and I'll condemn it 20 years from now, you ask me.
Right.
But it definitely, I think that is what occurred. I don't know if that's something you can agree with, or.
Well, I think an important thing to touch on is, going back to all the things, all the crazy kind of things that have happened to conservatives. All of this has happened. Keep this in mind. All of this has happened with a Republican president in office for 4 years, and it almost didn't feel like that for a lot of conservatives, I think, because I mean, Trump was on the defense almost for the first 3 whole years of his term. I mean, he had the Russian collusion, kind of bullshit. He had all this type of stuff. And once again, going back to these, private companies like Twitter, blah, 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 he can't really do anything to stop them censoring people, like you and me. And so the problem is conservatives, they see that all of this terrible, terrible stuff is happening under a Republican president, under their guy. So then when this, President Trump now apparently loses, and, the Democrats are now, about to be in power, and not just, the presidency, they have Congress. They likely, very likely could pack the court, and they have the presidency. And so if they do that, if they pack the court, they have control of all 3 branches of government. Now, how scary would that be? So what I think my point is Republicans, they sit back for 4 years and they see all this crazy stuff going on, and it's happening under their guy. It's happening under President Trump. All these bad things are happening to them. And Trump is doing his best. I'm not saying that Trump was not doing his best and was not fighting for us, because that's the first thing from the truth. He was fighting for us, but one man can only do so much. And so, I do think that there's almost a reasonable sense of fear amongst conservatives right now, because for the last 4 years, we saw these crazy things happening to us. And now, and that wasn't even under a Democrat president. It's not like this was under Obama, and a lot of this stuff was happening under Obama, and it was, starting to get worse and worse under Obama. Yes. But I mean, it just went to a whole new level under Trump, because they realized that someone like him, someone who can't be controlled, someone who isn't beholden to special interest groups, let's say,
yeah,
they need to make sure that someone like that cannot get elected again. And so it's very, very scary for conservatives, as they pretty much, and whether you want to believe if the election was stolen or not, it's a very scary prospect that we're now going to have 4 years at the very least of a Democrat president who happens to be a puppet for China.
I think that's scary too. Is not just the fact that there's a president who's a puppet for China. You have, what is his name, Swarwell, who was openly sleeping with a Chinese spy.
And he was just renamed, or he was just put back on the House Intelligence Committee.
It's absolutely terrible.
So how insane is that he's now getting national security intelligence briefings after he was confirmed to be sleeping with a Chinese spy? And this wasn't like, Trump is saying this and it's like Democrats have like an argument to push back here against this. The liberal FBI, the Democrat FBI is the one who released this and is the one who found this out, And so that's, this is no joke. I mean, we have politicians who are openly beholden to China, and their own voters don't care, and it's very, very scary. So once again, what happened on the 6th, it was very short-sighted, because another thing that's going to happen from all of this is we're already seeing now talks of a new domestic terror bill. And now what we're going to see, like we saw under Bush, Obama, and I mean, pretty much every president before Trump. I mean, Clinton, even under Reagan, even under, like I was saying, Bush, both Bushes and Obama, was the war on terror. And 99% of that was based off, intelligence from the CIA, FBI, whatever, our intelligence agencies say. And it was based on lies, 99% of it. So now we have, and I mean, this is another thing we have to understand. The left has been waiting for a moment like this, where conservatives just lose their shit. Just for one day, conservatives lose their shit. And so now it's going to be 10 times worse than people really could have ever imagined, because now we have Joe Biden talking about a new domestic terror bill. We are going to lose what little rights we had left. And that, I think, is what is so scary to so many people. And that is why I think there was such an urgency felt among those people who did storm the Capitol, because quite literally in their mind, whether, you can agree with this or not, they feel like their country, our country, is being stolen from them.
I think, and I wouldn't
it's a very scary time.
Stolen from them. I know for me, for instance, is that, like you said, it is very, very scary to have a Democrat president. Do I think that that is the end of the line? No. Well, I think what is even more scary is that the fact that you now have a partisan government. Like
Yes.
you have a Democrat House, a Democrat-led Senate, a Democrat president. All three.
And like I was saying, in all likeliness, they're going to pack the court.
Maybe the House. I'm sorry, with the exception of maybe the Senate, the Democrats that are inside the House and sit at the head of the table at the presidency are incredibly radical. Whether they want to put Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and paint them as conservatives, they're incredibly radical. Very, very, very radical.
Yeah, exactly.
From their inception. Joe Biden, when the Patriot Act got started, said finally, like my 1994 bill is coming to life, and supported the Patriot Act, which gave huge, huge power to the federal government when it came to surveillance and other means necessary to intrude on American life. And so I think that is what scares, is that for 2 years at least, until the midterm election, until we have American people have a chance to vote in the House and the Senate, because I think a lot of people do forget that, right? Is that they think that a president is voted in and that is like the end all be all. Well, in 2 years, there will be a midterm election. A third of the Senate seats will open up for election, and then some of the House seats will be up for election. And so I think these first 2 years are going to be incredibly rough. I do.
One thing I just have to jump, and I know that this is a topic we were saving for later on in the conversation, but I think, with what you just said, it's very important to kind of throw this in there, because everything you just said is 100% true, historically, 100% true that yes, it's not the end of the world if the opposing party gets elected president. Okay. It's not the end of the world. Like you're saying, in 2 years, you can vote, you can vote out Congress, you can take over control of Congress, and you can pretty much stop or just block any and all of his policies for the most part, or the more radical ones that he would need approval from Congress and the Senate. So those, that I agree with. But to go back to what I was saying, 11 million people, immigration. If he follows through and he legalizes 11 million new citizens who are currently living here, who do you think they're going to vote for? I mean, I think we all know.
Well,
that right then and there ruins and kills all of our chances.
What is your thoughts on his 5-year plan for immigration? So a path to citizenship for 11 million undocumented people in America, to have a path to citizenship within the next 5 years.
Well, so here's the thing. It's not, I'm all for immigration. That's pretty much, that is how our country was founded. It's how our country was started. We were a group of immigrants. We came over here. And there are, some great, the majority of immigrants that come here are great people, and they're hard workers, and anyone who says otherwise, they clearly just, I don't know, maybe they just don't like immigrants. I really don't know. But that's just not the case, that, there's just these hundreds of thousands of people who are all criminals and they're terrible people, coming into our country. But now when you legalize 11 million people over the span of 5 years, especially in, given the circumstances and the context, our country is currently in right now, with just how divided we are with our economy, unemployment. Is that a smart idea? No. And so that leads me to believe, and here's the thing, it's not like I'm saying Joe Biden is smart. He's going to introduce a lot of dumb policies. But let's be honest here. He's not, trying to legalize these 11 million citizens because he just has a big heart, which is what I'm sure you'll hear on every TV station, he just has such a big heart, empathy. That's all they say about him. That's just not the case. It's because he has 11 million new voters that he now has the authority to legalize and bring into his party. And if that happens, if Republicans do not stop that, if they do not stop that in the Senate, we are finished. The GOP is finished, and we can kiss our country goodbye.
Well, the problem is that even if the Republicans would have to find some kind of bipartisan support inside the Senate to block it, they would need at least one Democrat to cross the aisle, and then all 50 Republicans to vote against it. Because sitting now, if every Republican votes against it and every Democrat votes for it, then that's a 50-50 split. Given him,
well, I do.
Vice president.
So I could be wrong, but I did So yeah, you might have to correct me on this, but I was under the impression that it would need 67 votes in the Senate in order to pass.
You're going to need 2/3.
So, right. So that's what I had thought. I'm not 100% sure on that. Fact check me on that. Don't take my word for it.
Yeah.
But that's what I had thought. So if that's not the case, then yeah, we are so fucked. We are so fucked. Now, if that is the case, that you need 2/3, it's still even scary, because I think, as we see with impeachment, and not even impeachment, because that's kind of a hot button issue, because some people do think that Trump was responsible, for inciting whatever, the riot, whatever you want to call it, the insurrection, which I think is an outrageous name to call that. But I mean, if they don't stand up and if they don't do something, then we're screwed. And it's very, very likely that they won't, because when was the last time that they did stand up? Republicans did stand up for nearly anything. And, I've done a lot of reflecting since the 6th, and just thinking about Republicans and, Republican members of Congress and Senate. What do they stand for? What does the Republican Party stand for? I mean, we know it's pro-life. We know for the most part it's we know for the most part it's pro-police, pro-Second Amendment, pro-free speech, all these great, wonderful things. But when are they actually standing up for any of these ideals and not just talking about them to get your vote? And that's my main problem. Is I have very, very little faith that these Republicans will have any, if they don't have a spine. And that's what I think is more concerning than anything, is because Ted Cruz and people like him, and maybe I shouldn't use Ted Cruz because he is one of the better ones, but even people like him, I mean he's all he ever I mean, he's like an older version of AOC. It's like Twitter clapbacks. It's like what he's best at. I want to see real action. I want to see the GOP actually stand up for what its voters.
I think that
stand up for what the base wants.
For us here is, we want the GOP to do X. However, is that what every single, I'll throw back in two things. I will say that we forget often, and it's the government's fault that we forget it, to be honest, is that, so I am a constitutionalist, if you did not know that.
Right.
For every single question that I have relating to the government, my attention goes not from the 2021 or 2020. My eyes shoot straight back to the ratification of the Constitution and its amendments, because that is the framework. All of our questions can be answered inside that document. Everything that is supposed to be done, from how much power the federal government is supposed to have, from what power state governments are supposed to have, to what the federal government can and cannot be involved in. All of that is.
But is the federal government actually following that? Because even you mentioned the Patriot Act. That is one of the most blatant violations of our rights that were given to, once again, not given to us. These are, as our founding fathers put it, these are inalienable rights that government cannot give you and cannot take away. Okay, these are just inherent rights. The government stripped those rights away a long time ago.
I would challenge you with, what rights does the Patriot Act infringe on?
I mean, quite literally, the Patriot Act was used to spy on millions and millions of Americans.
But what is needed to do
that? Right there is one of the most egregious, I think, violations of our rights.
With a FISA warrant, which means that it's not.
And a FISA warrant was also used to spy, and a FISA warrant was also used to spy on President Trump. And I think we all know how phony that FISA warrant was.
It is, but
so it's not foolish.
If you're going to challenge a warrant, then that means that no arrest warrant is valid for criminals, no search warrant on houses are valid for criminals, because any of them could be made up and used for the wrong agenda. However, the Fourth Amendment does have a warrant requirement, and that is an exception to the Fourth Amendment. So therefore, I agree that the Patriot Act does extend the arm of the federal government more than it should, especially in that the idea of executive orders. I do not think that the president, any president, Republican or Democrat, should have the ability to just make laws and usurp legislation.
Right.
I do not agree with that. But I will say that it is also the federal government's responsibility to provide national defense. And the Patriot Act is meant to, in its broad spectrum, protect us against the likes of to 9/11. And so I think that a warrant requirement needed to get that surveillance done is provisionable under the Constitution.
So
But
hold
what I
on.
was trying to say back is I think that a lot of people forget, and I'm going to throw this back to, I think it's the 16th Amendment, and just to bring us back onto our topic of the Republican Party, is the 16th Amendment is where I think we went wrong in America. I will just be openly honest. Let me make sure I'm right on that. I'm almost positive that is it.
But hold on. I think I got to ask a question of you here. Do you know, I'm not accusing you of anything here. I'm just asking, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think that the Patriot Act was used to protect Americans or to further enforce the spy state and police state that we're slowly now moving towards?
I think that with everything good intentions, and it's kind of like a pendulum. If you think
that's where I would have to 100% disagree. I don't think there was an ounce of good intentions in that bill.
Think of like when 9/11 was out. Think of like 9/12, 2001, right? Think of how unified you saw bipartisanship on every single level of government: local government, county government, municipal government, state government, federal government. A genuine concern that, holy fuck, America was just attacked. And what do we need to do to ensure that that never happens again? Right? Now,
we now need to spy on millions of Americans.
There's a pendulum.
That was their answer. We now need to spy on millions of Americans and infringe upon their rights.
But it's not
because listen. In spying on someone as if they are a criminal without any due process, without any, like you're saying, a warrant, all this stuff, that is all illegal. That is not covered in the Constitution. You cannot just spy on someone because you think they are a criminal. You cannot just go through their messages. You cannot spy on them because you think they may be a criminal.
If probable cause exists,
have evidence.
If probable cause exists
and you need a warrant. And you need a warrant, right? And you would need a warrant, though. So you would need to go to a judge, show them the probable cause, show them the evidence.
Yes.
And the judge would then sign off on that. When is that ever happening with the millions of Americans that are currently right now? Right now, I can guarantee you millions of Americans are being spied on right now. So when, and like you're saying, the FISA courts, those have been known to be manipulated and abused. And I mean, and that's what I'm saying. The greatest example is they did it to the literal president of the United States.
Okay,
so if they can violate his rights, and if they can
so what you're
give all due process for him,
there's no time ever that the best interest of the American people shall ever have a warrant brought against them that would remove their Fourth Amendment.
No, because I think this is where it's kind of getting lost in the message here. I don't know. If they have a warrant, if they have probable cause, then yes, 100%. If they have evidence that if you've been chatting online with Al Qaeda or members of Al Qaeda, whatever, if you've been chatting online with ISIS, let's say, and they have probable cause or they have reason to believe that you're doing this or you're engaging in this type of activity and that you're a threat to public safety, then yes, that is what it was intended for. The Patriot, no, that's not what it was intended for. But that's what it was sold as the Patriot Act. That's what it was sold as. Is, well, if in the interest of public safety, we're going to take away a little bit of your privacy in the best interest of everyone else. But what I'm saying is that has been manipulated and abused beyond all belief. If you would have told Americans back then, if they could have gone forward in time and seen what happened with Snowden and everything that he released about the CIA and the NSA under the Obama administration, if Americans could go forward in time and see the end result of what happens when you give up even just a little bit of your privacy in the name of security, the government very often oversteps, and they don't just overstep a little bit. They very often they take the boot and they shove it down your throat. And so that's my main issue with the Patriot Act. Whether you think it was intended for good reasons or not, I don't really think that even really matters. The problem is it's not being used for the right reasons. And I can
100% agree with you on that. I just think that to completely throw away every single aspect of that because
but that's not exactly what I'm saying. I'm not saying, just get rid of it all and throw it all away and
you
never investigate anymore. I'm not saying that at all.
You're making the argument that it has been manipulated, which I agree with. We can agree on that 100%. But to do away with the portions of like the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court and the FISA warrants and things like that, right?
But once again, I'm not saying to get rid of that. I'm specifically criticizing the parts of the Patriot Act that have been used and abused to spy on Americans illegally. I mean, this is illegal. Some of the stuff that the federal government is now doing.
And
if we're going off the Constitution, what they're now doing with this is illegal.
I guess my question is to you is that if you have a act that we'll just agree to disagree or just whatever you want with part of the intentions of the Patriot Act. My part that I'm going to come back to is that every court in America, regardless, Supreme Court, local court, municipal, circuit, summary, any of them have been manipulated to do great acts of disservice to the American people, whether that be an unlawful arrest, an unlawful search and seizure. Insert said whatever egregious violation of the Constitution is. However, I do not believe that the portions of the Patriot Act that allow for us to defend national sovereignty. Because imagine if we took all that, let's say that the Patriot Act never happened, and let's say that none of that ever occurred. Let's just scratch that act. Where would we be right now? And that's look at is how much good has that done, and how much intel has
right. Well, that's exactly what I was actually about to ask you is, do you think that because of the Patriot Act, that's why we haven't seen all of this terrorism in the United States within our borders?
Well, yes.
Is that your position?
Besides domestic terror, look at Paris. Paris, how many terror attacks has Paris had in the last decade, right?
Well, that also has a lot to do with them, just welcoming refugees without even screening them, without even knowing where they come from, if they have any political or any ties with any extremist groups or anything. I mean, they just welcome them with open arms. So I think I think that is, a large reason why you're seeing a lot of the stuff happening in Europe is because they opened their arms to a lot of refugees coming from places like Syria and stuff like that. And
a very good buddy of mine from the UK.
And that really kind of, right. And that really kind of screwed them over. But now listen, the Patriot Act, I can't remember exactly when it was signed, but obviously in the early 2000s, we saw under Obama the rise of terrorism. And even under the last years of Bush, the rise of terrorism was insane. Now, under the last 4 years of Trump, and I'm not just blowing hot air on Trump or whatever because I voted for the guy. He quite literally crushed ISIS. Okay, he didn't need to. And maybe I'm wrong here, but there was no scandal of him spying on millions and millions and millions of Americans to do that.
Well, here's my question.
What he did is he stopped sending them pallets of cash, and he stopped funding terrorism. That's quite literally what Obama did. I mean, he literally funded terrorism, and and I don't think Obama, intentionally wanted, ISIS to form, but indirectly, that's exactly what happened because of his foreign policy. He quite literally saw the rise of ISIS because of the direct actions that he did. And once again, I'm not blaming him, saying that he wanted the rise of ISIS. I think that would be a horrible thing to say. I don't know. I don't put much under Obama, considering what I know about him. But I think it would be a little absurd to say that he meant for ISIS to be formed. But I think it's also very, very naive for him to be sending pallets of cash to places like Iran, which are known, funders of terrorism around the region. And then, we kind of wondered why we saw this huge rise of ISIS.
I'm going to bring us back. And I think that what I'm going to end this portion on and move us on to the next one is that you and I are in an agreement in the messaging that the Patriot Act does do very, very bad things for Americans.
Yeah.
Whether it's whichever part of it, right? Whether it be the executive order part of it and the executive branch's ability to just usurp the legislature and just bypass it completely, whether it be the start of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act that stemmed from the Patriot Act. What I think that all of those are very, very bad for America. But when we are talking about the Republican Party and the where I was going originally with the Constitution and with what you were saying about the Republican Party and like Senator Ted Cruz and things like that, is that oftentimes it's lost that originally the House of Representatives was elected by the people and its constituency. And it was elected by the people because they are supposed to be the most close to the people. And they are elected by the people to represent the people. Senators originally were not elected by the people. They were elected by the political parties that were in charge in that state.
The state, yes, the state legislature. You would elect your state legislature, and then they would appoint, your two senators.
And the
which
reason,
honestly,
the reason
that would maybe be a
senator's original job
reason to go back to that.
Is not to necessarily represent the people. That's not their job. There's a reason why the Senate's vast majority is like vetting cabinet members, approving treaty deals, things of national significance, things of huge significance than the Constitution's in the federal government's original constitutional duties, federal trade and federal defense. And that is the reason, and that right there is where I think that I don't want to say went wrong in America because it's an amendment to the Constitution. That is the document that we follow. But I definitely think that the split and allowing, because now the senators are answerable to the people. They now no longer can say, let's say if it's a Democrat, right, in a Democrat state, though the Republican bill is better, let's just say it, or vice versa.
Right.
They no longer are going to vote for what's best for the nation. They're going to vote for what's best for their constituency because their jobs depend on them voting for how their constituency wants them.
Well, to go back to the whole, they don't our politicians don't represent us. Like you're saying, in the literal sense, yes, they're supposed to be voting on behalf of their constituency, but they're not even doing that anymore. They're voting on behalf of the elites in their own political party that tell them, hey, listen, here's what you got to vote for. Here's what you got to say no to. Here's what you got to vote yes on. And that's I think that's actually the big problem. And I mean,
what do you think Biden's first 100 days is going to be like?
Well, I think he's made a lot of bold promises. I don't know if he's banking on the media to just cover up for him and kind of dissolve all of his words when these don't come to fruition. These kind of crazy plans, like he's now claiming he's going to vaccinate 100 million people in his first 100 days. And I think that's kind of absurd to think that that's actually feasible. So I don't know if someone has been telling him that, this is feasible. This is how we're going to do it, blah, 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 blah. And I'm sure it is feasible,
that's
but
the basement gremlins telling him that.
well, I'm sure it's feasible to get 100 million shots in his first 100 days. I'm sure it's very doable, but this is also the federal government we're talking about.
Yes.
One of the most incompetent bodies, I think, ever. I mean, they're just not good at their job.
Do you think that his student loan forgiveness is good or bad?
Well, it depends on who. It depends on who you're asking. Yeah. Well, listen, it depends on who you're asking. If you're asking a college student who's massively in debt, they're going to say, yes, it's a great thing. It's a great thing for me. It's going to free me up economically and give me more opportunity because I won't have this debt hanging over my head. Then if you go to a taxpayer, someone in, let's say, a higher tax bracket than maybe the average person, they're now going to be paying for the mistakes of not only the students for falling into these kind of, because here's another thing, these loans are very predatory, okay? And they were designed like that. The loans are taking advantage of young, and to put it mildly, dumb college students who think that they're going to be able to get a liberal arts degree and then pay $400,000 or $100,000 worth of debt back. It's not feasible. And I think the problem lies at the feet of both the federal government and the actual people who do this. And that's not saying you shouldn't get a student loan, but you take out the loan, and then now that it hasn't gone as you planned, it hasn't worked out, now you want a bailout. And that's just not something that I'm kind of, in favor for, especially because let's say, and now obviously I'm still in college, but let's say I had $50,000 worth of debt and I was 30 to 40 years old and I had just paid it off. All right. I worked so damn hard. I just paid it off. And then boom, 2021 comes, Biden's elected, or he's installed. I think that's a better word for he's installed as the next president. And now it's almost like a slap in the face to people who have done it the right way and the people who have paid back their debt and worked their ass off, because now their tax dollars are going to be going to the people, the college students who are now in debt, who are asking for the bailout. So,
my better question about all of that, and I kind of just thought about it, is so let's say January 21st, 2021, right, when he becomes the president, when he's inaugurated, right, and he forgives all the student debt. Let's say it's gone, right? Now it's up to the taxpayers. That doesn't end student debt, because next semester,
exactly,
all of those students, or next school year, when they apply for their FAFSA or whatever it may be, right? Or they get student loans, whatever.
Right.
There's just going to be more student debt again.
Right.
Schools just end. So now, 2 years from now, are we just going to absolve the student loan?
Exactly. Are we going to be doing this every 4 years with every president, or what's the plan here? And this is the problem.
Trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars.
Exactly.
Taxpayers.
Exactly.
And
this is
4 years.
This is kind of something that you see almost among the left, if I'm just being totally honest, is you kind of see them. They don't want to attack the real root of the problem. And like I said earlier, just a moment ago, part of the responsibility and part of the fault lies at the federal government for not protecting college students more and regulating the banks more, who are giving out these predatory loans to kind of young and dumb college people. Well, no. I'm not at all saying that the majority of the blame at all goes to the federal government. No, but what I'm saying is they've handled it poorly as well. And now their plan, or at least the Democrats' plan, is let's just throw money at it, and the problem will go away without actually addressing the real root of the problem. And like you're saying, the same problem is going to arise next month. Exactly. They're going to pay off the debt, and then the whole new class of college students that come through, what's going to happen with them? So is this like and I haven't read up, to be honest, a lot on his student debt forgiveness plan. So I don't know if he's got something where it's kind of like a long-term thing where it's not just kind of like a blanket forgiveness of all debt for, past college students who have the debt and current students who have the debt. I don't know if it's going to apply to students in the future, and it's just going to be this thing where it's like now you can just take out hundreds of thousands of dollars of loans and you just never have to pay it back. But I don't think it's a good idea to just start throwing billions and billions, if not trillions of dollars at a problem without even addressing why this problem is happening or why it's occurring. And yeah, I mean, I think if anything, if we want to stop the whole student debt loan crisis or whatever you want to call it, we need to be educating college students more to not get involved with these debts. I mean, because a lot of, even parents, it's almost like, I was never told about student debt. I was never told, even by my teachers in high school. I was never told, look out for this, don't do this, or, be careful when getting out a loan and the interest and all this stuff,
I will agree with you. I think that there needs to be more education about it.
Right.
Regarding that too. But I will almost say there is not a student loan debt issue, right? Like, let's say you have $60,000 in student loans. Let's just say that, right? That's a car payment. That's a brand new car payment, right? Which was a choice that you chose. You chose to go to college at whatever college you decided to go to.
Right.
Take out a loan for whatever you decided you wanted to take out a loan for. With whatever APR, APY, whatever, insert said loan, right? But people take out loans for everything across the board.
Right.
So to say that there is a student loan issue, no, that the idea of loans and debt and
exactly, it's functioning exactly as it was set up.
Exactly, there's not an issue with that. And
right. No, I 100% agree.
I'm going to and I'm sorry, Chase, I've done this a lot in this one, which actually surprised me, is I'm going to challenge your initial statement, saying that I think we need the federal government to intervene. I do not think that. I think that.
Oh, well, no. I could be wrong, but I don't think I said that. I don't think I said we need the federal government to intervene.
The federal government, because they're not protecting college students. I don't think.
No. I said blame. I think there's blame on both sides. That is, and maybe I should have clarified more. In no way am I saying that the federal government should then now bail out all of these people. That is not at all what I meant to say or what I meant to construe.
No, Chase, let me finish. I think that the government shouldn't be involved in it at all. I shouldn't at all. 0%. And here's why. Because just like you said earlier, you give the government just a little bit of, say, hey, we need you to intervene on this for X reason. You now have all the federal government now jumping into that little space that you needed them to help with. And now they're going to stick their thumb into another pot that it doesn't need to be involved in.
Right.
Like that is not where the federal government needs to be that. Because I think you can agree, you put the government in that, you now have the government driving the market. You now have the government driving what the banks can and can't do, what they can lend for, what they can't lend for, instead of allowing the capitalistic nature. Because they could say, this bank could say, hey, I will give you this loan for this amount with X APR, right?
Right.
Well, the capitalist now says, that's a shitty deal. I'm not going to take that. Goes to the next bank. This is what this bank offered me. Offer me better. And so it's not the federal government's job to bail out or intervene or put any sanctions. That's just the free market. If that's the case, then it needs to be doing that in home loans, car loans, personal loans, credit card.
Well, yeah, exactly. It sets the precedent where it's like, well, where does it stop? If we're going to bail out student loan debt, are we now going to bail out every form of debt, or are we just going to, are we just going to just start handing out money? So
I'm not.
All of it. It's a dangerous slippery slope.
But I want to say, so let's say, right? Because we all know that the left loves the socialistic idea of things, right?
Right.
They love that. Equal things for all, not equal opportunity for all, equal outcomes for all.
Yes, equity, not equality, equity.
Exactly. So now they're going to be like, well, we forget student loan debt. But listen, here, guys. I will also pay for your truck. I will not pay for your car. All you have to do is give me the power.
Exactly.
To protect you from these very nasty banks. And then I will make sure that you don't have that debt anymore. Boom, they now secured the banks. Okay, well, now I hold the money because now you're going to take loans from the government. But wait, your wages suck and now you can't repay me. So now I'm going to intern you into some form of servitude to pay back that loan that you took from the federal government at some astronomical rate, because that's the only place that you can take that loan from. And so I think that is a very slippery slope to a very, very bad place for us.
Well, yeah, I would agree on that.
So I also want to say, speaking of like Biden being inaugurated and things like that, he was elected by the people, right? Please tell me why 28,000 National Guard troops, armed National Guard troops, are now sitting on top of Capitol Hill.
Well, the crazy thing is I know you say armed. Many of them actually aren't armed. If you look, they are armed in the literal senses. They have guns on their persons. Yes, they don't have magazines in them. If you look at all the pictures, I am yet to see one National Guardsman with a magazine in their rifle.
I did see one, and it was in a state capitol. I don't remember what state it was. I did see it. They were standing in front of a Humvee, two guys, and they did have magazines. Whether there was one in the chamber and their weapon was racked, right? I don't know. But that's the only one I will grab. In
DC though, no, they most of them they do not have magazines in their guns, and the reason for that is, well, you can thank Pelosi and Schumer, because they've now called on the defense secretary. I think his name is Chris Miller or something like that. He's the acting defense secretary, to be vetting all of the troops, because God forbid any of them voted for Trump, they must be terrorists and they must want to kill Joe Biden. So the level of kind of craziness that's happening, I really have never seen anything like it.
Oh, funny meme. I don't know if you saw it. I was like, it's funny that the guy who won an open and fair election by the people now names 28,000 armed military members to protect him from the people that voted for him.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, if we're going off of the narrative here, he's supposedly the most popular president ever.
which
He
I think
received
is
the
incredibly hard
most
to believe.
ever votes. Oh, well, it's
Like,
100% fabricated.
yeah,
Listen, he
you're telling me that
supposedly,
he got more votes than Obama did
yeah,
his first
exactly.
term?
And
Get the hell out.
not even like by a little bit, okay?
Like, it was
He
like
got
what,
11
votes,
11 million more votes than Obama. Obama. I
and he
mean,
never left his bank.
Joe
Never left
freaking
his bank.
Biden got 11 million more votes than Obama. And I can't believe it, because as much as I don't like Obama, the man was a gifted speaker and
He
a
was
master liar.
incredibly eloquent.
Exactly. He was a gifted speaker and a master liar. He could convince you if you were gullible enough, and if you were open-minded enough to him, and if you weren't, if you didn't have your suspicions of him, and if you just trusted, he was very easy to trust because of how eloquent he
You want to know
talked.
what he reminded
And
me
he
of?
duped a lot of
No
people.
way to speak bad about MLK. Dr. MLK was a great guy, and what he did for the American civil liberties and civil rights, phenomenal.
Right.
But I think what got Obama so far is that Obama kind of had like a Dr. MLK vibe to him.
Yeah,
That
he did.
he was going to bring the peace, that he was going to be the ability. And we saw under Obama that coalition built. The coalition that we're currently facing today was built under the Obama administration. Those outcasts of race, sex, insert said whatever ethnic community or racial community or like
Identity politics. Identity politics.
Right. We saw the rise of politics
yes,
under Obama. And now we're seeing that is what we're fighting. The Squad, AOC, Rashida Tlaib,
right.
and Omar, all of those, that is the forefront of the Biden administration. And that is the forefront of those that are going to set the policies for the next at least 2 years to come. And that is what we're fighting under.
Well, and another reason, I mean, very similar, believe it or not, to President Trump. He was the populist for the left. And so he was able to pull in a lot of moderates and independents that were skeptical of DC politicians and knew how corrupt politicians were. Because of his great speaking and because of the policies he was advocating for, he was trusted by a lot of people. I mean, he was running on, we need to stop prosecuting whistleblowers. When our government messes up, whistleblowers, they shouldn't be prosecuted. They should be held because, we should be wanting to improve as a government and all this stuff. And then at the first sign of any whistleblower, Edward Snowden, it was immediately the full force of the federal government was brought against him and the hammer was dropped. And that's just, one basic thing. But the gist of what I'm saying is he was advocating for a lot of populist policies. He was advocating as a non-interventionist. He was like these endless wars, similar to President Trump. But then again, he was the one who even worse than Bush. I mean, he was like Obama. That's what some people called him, Obama. He was bombing places like there was no tomorrow.
I got two questions for you. The first one's going to be, the first one's not even a question. It's just a statement. I agree. I think that President Trump is one of the few presidents in the last probably 20 years.
In the last 40 years, he's the only president to not start a new war.
Well, yes, but that's not what I was going to. I was going to say deliver on the majority of his campaign promises.
Yes, 100%.
Things that he campaigned on that garnered him the support of the people to be elected in 2016. He delivered and then some on all of them.
Exactly.
Now, you can obviously argue that he needs to stay the hell off Twitter and stop just making dumb statements because he is the president.
Right.
You can't argue with his policies, and you can't argue with the fact that he's
accomplished almost more than in his first 4 years. He's gotten more stuff done than nearly any other president. And it's actually funny you say that because I was actually visiting my father and my stepmother actually in North Carolina. That's where I just came back from. And so today, and they despise, I shouldn't say they despise Trump. They don't vote. They're not really Republican or Democrat, but from what I've been able to infer, they definitely lean slightly Democrat. Okay. But, and I couldn't believe this when they said it. And they said with the straightest face, they said, well, one thing we will say about Trump is he's definitely done the most out of any president. And I could not, I almost couldn't believe.
I think that's
I almost couldn't believe it. But
when I think about like the election and things like that, and I have two dissenting opinions that ram like full bore at each other inside my head. They just fight constantly. And one is that I look at the election and I'm like, wait a second, wait. There is so much like at the like least circumstantial evidence that would suggest that the election was not
fair. It was not a free and fair election.
I think that the fact that they said that this was the most securest election ever in history, it almost makes me laugh. But especially seeing that, I think it was like in Texas. I think a lady was just arrested for election fraud. But
yeah,
it is the most secure election ever. But so I have that right, and the fact that over 54% of Americans said that they're better off now than they were 4 years ago. So
under the pandemic too.
Yeah, and you're telling me that the guy who never left his basement, who couldn't get a crowd more than like 100 people, somehow just sweep this election. So there's that opinion in my head, right? And then at the same time, I have the opinion that I'm like, well, I'm one of those few people in the world, especially one of the few like hard conservatives in the world, that I believe in the system. I truly, truly, truly do. I believe in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the amendments, the exceptions to the amendments, the warrant, all of it, right? Like I believe in the American system. And so
I think it's important to distinguish the Constitution from the federal government, right? Because the system, the federal government, what I think of.
If we're going to still trust the government and still say that, because I posed the question earlier, if we had reached that point where it was tyrannical, and you and I both agreed that we may not be there yet. Which means that at some point there's still withholding within the confines of the Constitution. So and that's the two dissenting opinions, right? Is that I trust that system, and I trust that the federal government is doing the best that they can for us, right? But then on the other side of it, I have, well, wait a second. This election doesn't seem right. Like, I don't understand how there's all these constitutional violations that are occurring. And so those are the two things that just slam together, like full bore in my head, just constantly. Because I do believe in the American system. I'm like I said, I'm sure that I'm one of the few people left in America that still believe in the Constitution. Because there's a lot of people that are calling for referendums of it, that
I think to be fair, a lot of that is coming from one side of the political aisle. I haven't seen many at least, and I could be totally blindsided. I could be, blinded just based on what I see off social media. I have seen to be totally honest, I've seen zero conservatives on my page, on other people's pages, advocating for even any tweak to the Constitution, let alone actually, a hardcore overhaul of it. Think
of like the conservative base that was demanded and then was pissed when Mike Pence would not overturn these certified results. The Constitution, he does not have that power. He does not. There is no point in that Constitution where he can say, yeah, those are the state certified results. Well, I'm the vice president, I'm proceeding over this, so yeah, we're not accepting that. Like that, nowhere in the Constitution is that allowed. But you saw a vast number of people on the right calling for that.
Well, no, you're definitely right about that. But I think it's not just as simple as that. I think the context of the situation was this year was an unprecedented election year. I mean, we saw claims of voter fraud and circumstantial evidence, at the very least, that something was up, something happened. Okay. Yeah. So, and considering that there really wasn't a remedy for this, I mean, and there is, the state legislatures, they appoint the electors. That's the remedy for it, for fraud. But the state legislatures, they didn't stand up. They didn't do anything. And I watched a lot of these hearings in the state legislatures, and the people who came forward under oath, under penalty of perjury, and they were telling their story of what happened. These were poll watchers and, election officials, testifying to the constitutional violations and in some cases, fraud that they personally witnessed. To see the level of representatives in the state legislatures completely dismiss them as crazy or conspiracy theorists, I was almost blown away. Because even on a state level, you assume that your representatives on a state level are more connected to you than the people in DC. The people in DC, the politicians in DC, they're very disconnected from real Americans and in their life and what they want. A lot of them are corrupted, and a lot of them couldn't care less. And a lot of them, to be fair, they just don't know. They're clueless. And on a state level, that's not something that or at least I had assumed that I would see to the level that I did. I mean, I saw multiple senators from the Michigan legislature pretty much scoff and laugh at witnesses who were risking their reputation, possibly their jobs, and possibly even their safety of not only themselves, but their family members, to say what they had witnessed on November 3rd and 4th. Yeah. And to see them just totally dismiss them and act like these weren't even issues. That's, just to go back to January 6th too, that's another reason why people were just so angry, because no one even was listening. There was all these claims and all this stuff and all this evidence, and no one even took any of it seriously. And I think that's what was so frustrating.
So the next question, I completely understand, and I agree that the amount of information, I'm sorry, not the amount of information, the amount of like attention that those claims received was incredibly low.
It was disgraceful, to be totally honest, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, and I said it from day one. I'm sure you watch my show. And so if there's evidence, it needs to be investigated. And until all the evidence is heard and all the court cases are adjudicated and a legitimate investigation has been conducted, like Ted Cruz said, on January 6th, we're not asking you to overturn the election. I'm asking you for 10 days to have an honest, unbiased investigation.
Yes.
Because over half of America does not believe that the election was.
And that's all we asked for. That's all we wanted. That is all we wanted. And
I think that
and I promise you right now, if they took us seriously, those people would not have done what they did at the Capitol. If they felt like what happened at the Capitol was a group of people who for not only the past 2 months, since after the election, but for the last 4 years, they felt berated, silenced, and they felt harassed by not even just by the left, by even some of their own politicians in the GOP. If we're just being totally honest here, and they were just fed up. I mean, because especially with how big of a contested election this was. I mean, one of the most important elections I think we've had in a while, especially given how divided our country is, and just the stark contrast between the two candidates. It was a very, very important election, and to see so many claims, and then to see just about none of them really given the time of day by anyone with any power was really disheartening, I think, for a lot of people.
Speaking of January 6th, I want to bring up something huge that's coming from it. And you've been on social media, you've been silenced yourself. You've been shut down and had your account banned, blocked, removed. What do you think? So I'm going to just say it outright. So currently, past January 6th, the left, the mainstream media, tons of politicians, political hats, whatever you want to call them, right, have called for the silencing of conservatives and Republicans across all platforms, mainly because they're like, well, you voted for Donald Trump, and it is Donald Trump's for all this, and these riots were just an outcome that you all knew was coming. And so because of that, you should not have a platform and should not be heard because you knew this was going to happen all along and you still voted for them.
Right.
So what do you think is going to come? How far do you think this is going to go before it gets any better?
Well, and it's, I don't want to be like a Debbie Downer, and I don't want to depress anyone who's listening to this, but I really don't think it's looking good. And I didn't think it was looking very good even before the events that happened on the 6th. And now, like I was saying, earlier in the podcast, this is going to be used against conservatives for the foreseeable future, for years and years to come. And all it took was it was like over a span of like 3 hours. All it took was 3 hours of weakness from only a few hundred to a couple thousand people. And they will now use those actions of a small few, and they will now apply that to the 75 million Americans who voted Republican and who voted for Trump this year. And that's the scary thing. I mean, they're already talking about a domestic terror act.
I think that
And
it's
once again,
they see all of this, especially seeing that given their mindset, that means that every single Democrat, which this is not true, for all
right.
listeners, this is not true, is that every single Democrat supports BLM riots and the burning of streets by that because Joe Biden, that's
Exactly.
his party that did that. So does that mean every single
Exactly.
Democrat that voted for him supports those? No,
Exactly.
he
No.
announced the riots a week after they happened when he finally emerged from his basement, saw the light of day, probably because somebody just brought him up on their leash. But he did denounce it nonetheless. But does that mean that every single Democrat then supports BLM and Antifa? I don't think so.
No. Exactly. No. Exactly. I mean, I have multiple family members who voted for Joe Biden, and at least when it comes to my uncle and my aunt, I don't know. I don't think. I mean, they don't seem like the type. I know they're staunch Democrats, but they're not the type to support riots and violent protests and stuff like that. And not once when I saw BLM and Antifa attacking innocent people in the streets did I stop and think and say, wow, I can't believe my family members support this, who voted for Joe Biden, because that's just not the case with a lot of Democrats. And it's the same thing with Republicans. It's not the case that, the majority of Republicans supported what happened on the 6th. But the scary thing for Republicans is, and here's where the big difference is the people who do support it on the left have a much larger platform and they have institutional power currently in our government. And that's the scary thing. You did not see after the 6th, you did not see one Republican who did not immediately denounce wholeheartedly what happened on the 6th. We still have hundreds of Democrats in Congress and including, Kamala Harris herself. What has she said about the violent riot? She set up a bail fund to bail out the rioters. So quite literally, it's not that she denounced them. It's not even that she stayed silent. She actively supported it and funded it. So
she never even did a bail fund for all those that she put in for simple marijuana possession.
Exactly. Exactly. So here's the scary thing though, is what I'm saying is it's not like the bad Republicans and the people on the far right, which I wouldn't even call Republicans, the people on the far right, they don't have institutional power. They are not members of our current government. The people on the far left, the people who actively called for violence, the people who actively supported and even funded it, they are about to hold the highest office in the land. So if that doesn't concern people, then I don't know what does. Because like I'm saying, it would be scary.
I think the infringement on our freedom of speech is probably the scariest thing that I have seen in my life. I have deployed. I'm a cop. I live my life. And in my 27 years of living, the silencing of millions of Americans, the deplatforming of certain companies, the pulling of advertisements from certain people, just because they're conservative, and the silencing of their First Amendment is probably one of the scariest things I have seen in my entire life. No, it is.
It's horrifying.
It is the scariest
thing
in my entire life. So my last question for you, Chase, is with everything going on, it's about to happen on Capitol Hill tomorrow, the next few years, how do you think the Republican Party moves forward? And what roles do young Americans like yourself play in it?
Well, to touch on the first kind of part of that question there, where does the Republican Party go from here? I don't think the trajectory at the moment, and like you're saying, we have 2 years for the trajectory to change. It's currently not headed up, at least from everything I've been able to tell. With all the pissed off people right now, the pissed off conservatives and the pissed off Republicans, rightfully so, the party is not looking good right now. The party is very fractured. And to add fuel to the fire, you have now top Republicans, Liz Cheney, Mitch McConnell, who, Mitch McConnell's there. He hasn't openly supported impeachment, but he's flirted with the idea, and he hasn't said that he would vote against it or that he would whip votes, against it at all. So he's pretty much left the door open to convicting Trump. And Liz Cheney, the third most powerful Republican in the House, she voted to impeach Trump. And so all that this is doing, and I really don't know if the GOP is just straight up, stupid or what they're doing or what they're thinking, but people like Liz Cheney, they are hurting the Republican Party, and they're hurting themselves, I think, more than they could imagine. Right now, it's not looking good, I don't think, for the Republican Party. But like I said, we've got 2 years to turn it around. So
forward, and you can agree with me if you agree with this, is that, like you said, it is a fractured party. You have old era Republicans, and
right,
then you have new Trump era Republicans.
exactly.
And those are the two, I guess you could say, like subcategories in the Republican Party. But unfortunately, is that the Trump era Republicans don't support old era Republicans, and old era Republicans aren't supporting new Trump era Republicans.
Yep.
And I think that until there is a mesh of those two, I think that is, if I was to say, where do I think that it needs to move from here, is I think that inside our own caucus, for just a 5 minutes, we need to ignore the Democrats, the liberals, the progressives, all that. We need to just ignore them. And us as a caucus need to turn inward and look at ourselves and fix our party, fix what's going on inside the Republican Party. So then as one party, we can attack and then defend the American Constitution, the American values against that other party. And the other side that is currently with, and I hate to say that, I hate to pit two political parties directly with each other, because we are one country. I think that is very polarizing words on my behalf. But what I'm saying is that there is a direct assault on conservatives, Republicans, and a direct assault on our freedom of speech.
Yes.
And so the only way to do that is, I think, to move forward, and you can agree or disagree, is that we need to just ignore them for a second. Just let them do whatever they're going to do.
Right.
5 minutes.
Right. We need to straighten ourselves out before we can start focusing on fixing the problems within the other side of the aisle.
And I think that is the role that young Republicans hold, is that eventually it's going to talk about it. Mitch McConnell, Liz Cheney, all of them, eventually they're either going to get voted out of office or they're going to die. There's no, but ensuring that there's young Republicans to fill that seat that are legitimate Republicans, people that actually care about, one, the caucus, because everyone's going to give Mitch McConnell a hard time. But I got to say, I got to rewind. I would be remiss if I did not say this. And you're going to disagree with me, Chase. I know this, but I have to say this.
Oh, God.
Mitch McConnell, for all
no, don't do it.
Gives him.
Don't do it.
Mitch McConnell did one great thing.
Oh, man.
Mitch McConnell is very, very good at far sight protecting the Republican Party. Not necessarily the people, but like he understands that pendulum of government, that, okay, we do this right now, but eventually that pendulum is going to swing back the other direction. And what is that pendulum going to do when it's on the other side of the aisle? What is that going to do to the Republican Party? And that is up until January 6th, I will say, that is the one thing that Mitch McConnell has always been good at, is protecting the caucus, protecting the party, and ensuring that the party's majority in the Senate is protected.
I think part of what you said has some truth to it, actually. One thing I would disagree on, though, just with that last part, like you said, he's very good at protecting the majority in the Senate. He quite literally lost us the Senate. I mean, in my eyes, a week before the runoffs, he decided it would be a good idea to shoot down a $2,000 stimulus check, which happened to be, whether you think it's a good idea or not, it happened to be wildly popular. And from a political strategy point of view and perspective, that was a terrible decision for him to, in the eyes of many voters. And this is what I'm saying. I'm not saying that this is the case, but this is how the voters perceived it. It was very cold-hearted of him to slash down the 2,000 because it provided the greatest opportunity that Democrats could have ever asked for. I mean, I saw buses outside of voting stations, huge buses, DNC buses, where all it said was vote Democrat, get $2,000. I mean, that was half of half of their campaigning, and it absolutely crushed us.
I think that I think that I will stand by that. I think that he did a great job denouncing that bill. I think that it 100% should not be passed, and it ever, regardless of what people want, because that's the
right. We're right, but
remember,
right, but that's what I'm. But hold on, but that's what I'm saying though, is whether that's what I'm saying. I didn't even say that I agreed with the 2,000 per se. I mean, I think you know where I stand on that, but without even getting into that, right. But without even getting into that, I didn't even say that I supported the two. It doesn't matter if you support it, whether you think it's a good idea or a bad idea. The voters, the people we needed to vote for us, to get, Loeffler and Perdue back into the Senate, they were very upset by that. They were pissed.
What I think it was.
And at the end of the day, the voters matter much more than what McConnell thinks.
This is what I think I think that we lost the Senate, and I hate to say this, but was at Trump's hands. I think you could put Georgia defeated Donald Trump because a lot of Republicans didn't trust the Dominion voting systems there. So there are probably hundreds of thousands of Georgian Republicans that did not vote because they did not trust the voting system. You had days before the election, Donald Trump saying, "Don't trust Georgia's voting systems."
Well, listen. I think it's a fair point. I think it's a fair point, but I think it's also a little too simplistic. I think a lot of it had to also do with Republicans just being pissed with the GOP in general.
I think that and oftentimes that there's a lot of misunderstanding. And I said this last time you and I talked, that the same way there is with law, civilians or voters believe that law works some way, and that's not just how it works until they get pissed off. I think a lot of Americans believe the government can either A, do something that they can't, or B, want them to do something that they shouldn't, or insert said item, and they just don't understand. Like you said, they just get a really simple view of
100%.
When they don't do this because of this, but it's actually because of this, and this is tied into this, and they don't look at that big, broad picture. I think that's a lot of it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, like you said, it's a multitude of factors. I mean, I think it's on my part as well. I mean, I think it's too simplistic for either of us to say, for you to say it was Trump's fault we lost the Senate. I think it's too simplistic for me to say McConnell lost us the Senate. I think you could easily say that Trump didn't really help. He did campaign for Loeffler and Perdue, but 100% casting doubt on the voting systems did not drive up turnout. And whether you wanted to debate whether the voting systems were secure or not, or whether it even would have mattered, that's neither here nor there. The fact of the matter is a lot of people were pissed off with the GOP as well. And they wanted to stick it to Mitch McConnell and everyone who they've been pissed off with, and the people who they thought abandoned Trump. It was kind of like a big fuck you to them.
What do young Republicans then play moving forward in that? I
don't want anyone to get offended here. This is not ageist or anything like that. It's a statistical fact here. The demographics of the Republican Party, a lot of it is older voters. So I think obviously, the people like myself, people like you, the younger kind of Republicans, the younger kind of voters, they obviously have a very big role to play. But I think people like you and me, we need to be focusing around people our age, right? Because that's something the Democrats are very good at, is they kind of realized, okay, there's such a big gap in support between, older people for Democrats and Republicans. Like I said, older people very, very much so tend to vote Republican more than they do Democrat. That's just the fact of the matter. And they kind of, and this is totally, messed up, but they kind of just gave up on that demographic. And they said, okay, we're going to shift all of our kind of energy to the 30 to 40 year olds and the college age kids and above. And because the people who are 18 to, I can't remember the exact number, but around 18 to 25, that's the biggest voter demographic in this past election. That was the biggest voter demographic. And the young people showed up. They showed out. And they didn't show out for Donald Trump. And that really hurt us. And so the GOP's messaging.
Just so I guess summarize that to make sure that I'm understanding, is that the young Republicans, we need to then focus our attention on the same demographic as us. So those from 30 years old and below, and get them on board with conservative values and conservative beliefs.
Right.
Awesome.
Right.
Well, Chase, I appreciate you for coming. As always, it's always a blast. I know that this one, actually, I thought our last one was pretty heated, but it's always nice to have cordial dissent, especially against those that you believe and have so much in common with. I think that if this kind of conversation would happen amongst other Republicans in our caucus, and then across the aisle with our peers, that a lot more things will get done in America if you could just have a cordial conversation of dissenting opinions.
100%.
As always, man, as I've always said, if you ever want to come back on the show, man, just let me know. Until then, guys, I wish all of you a great and happy hump day tomorrow. Make sure that you tune in for some live inauguration coverage tomorrow. And as always, God bless you and God bless America.